Okay, so today we're going to talk about a very interesting subject, DPTs, diatonic passing tones. And diatonic means pertaining to a scale, so you know, diatonic passing tones. And diatonic passing tones always move on scale tones or two scale tones only. They're a little more elusive when we are not thinking in chordal or vertical tones. So it's essential to keep the horizontal context in mind. In the example that I'm going to play you, we pick tones -3 and 5 of a chord, okay? The minor third and the fifth. And we're going to use a PC, and we'll use a PC that's very simple. That means position change, PC. Okay, so we're going to use a PC and an interval for the bass, and that's called a root cycle. So we're going to use a root cycle 5. So it means that if I'm, let's say I'm on a B flat chord, let's say, okay, and I'm going to use a root cycle 5. It means I'm going to move 5 chromatics, or it's a fourth diatonically, but for us, we think in terms of chromatics. So it's 5. I go down to an F, okay? And then the F would go to C and G and D, and it'd be the root cycle, okay? So here is a B flat little triad. It's got -3 and 5 and the root. So it's... Now that is going to move root cycle 5. So it's going to go to an F. Now I'll play the F root up here because I want to keep my range limit up here. It doesn't matter where you play the root though. It's a root is a root. Okay, so here. Okay, so that's the -3 of the B flat and the 5. And the -3 is now going to the 5 of an F minor. And the 5 of the B flat is going up to the -3 of the F. So we have now this. And that's very pretty. And that's what we're going to use to explain diatonic passing tones. Okay? So a diatonic passing tone, diatonic pertaining to a scale, passing tone, scale tones, and we're moving in one direction, okay? We're going to move them up. So the 5 is going to move to the 6, going to the -3 of the F. And the next would be the 5 of the F going to the 6 and going to the C minor chord, which would be the -3. So the 5 going to 6, going to -3 of C. So it's... Okay, now that gives you musicality when you have these little things, diatonic passing tones. Okay, the thing is, when you add a diatonic passing tone 5 to 6, you get continuous movement, which is really nice. And so that sometimes moving from the 5th to the 6th tone is not actually going to be a passing tone, because sometimes you just end up on that note. I'll show you. So if I want to go from 5 to 6 and I'm going to a 4 chord, now it's an anticipation, right? But if I'm going to F root, so going from a B flat minor To an E flat, there's no diatonic passing tone from here to here, right? Because this is part of the E flat. Since it's part of the E flat, we can put something in there, but that is going to be called a chromatic alteration. So watch. And so if I'm going from B flat to E flat or B flat to F, I can use a different type of tone movement. One is a chromatic alteration and one is a diatonic passing tone. So that, if we put that through root cycles, now it's going to go B flat, F, C, G, D, A, E. So we would essentially do this. And you could keep going. You could keep going until you come back to the B flat if you want, right? Okay. Root cycles and RCs, those are bass movements. And an RC is measured in half steps. So if I say RC2 and I tell you a direction going down, it's an RC2 descending. Okay? So let's say I have a G chord. Have a little G chord here. And I'm going to go down 2. That would go to an F chord. The thing is, we wouldn't do it parallel that way because generally when you're voice leading, you want to try to move in the opposite direction of the root. So I'm in G, going down 2. I would play F up. So it would be like this. It's prettier and it's balanced because now you have contrapuntal movement. And when you have contrapuntal movement, the ear just naturally likes it. Right? The ear just naturally likes it. Okay, so what if I kept going? I'm going G, F. What would be the next descending? Would be an E flat, right? Because it'd be 2 half steps down from the F. Here we go. G, F, E flat, D flat, and then to the B, which take me up here. Is D flat, and I'd play the B up here. And remember, you can play the root in any octave. You want to try to have a nice line in your roots, but it can be in any octave. All right? And so if I'm going G to F, I could play this F, but it's too far away to make the voice leading. Right? So that's voice leading, and that's how you're going to practice chords. Once we talk about triads and how to voice lead them, which is coming up real soon, you'll have great exercises on the guitar. Right now we're talking about tonal movement, okay? So we have the diatonic passing tones, which are scale tones, and they move in a direction going into the new chord or the new key. And so the next thing to do is to start looking at leading tones. Okay, a leading tone is a tone that makes a leap and it leads into another chord tone. And it can be all kinds of things, but it generally skips a scale tone, right? So if I'm on a C chord, right, and I want to go to A flat, right, I can go. That's a leading tone or a leaping tone. They always move into the new scale tone or the new tone by a scale tone or chromatic. Mostly I use them as chromatics, but anyway, so that's a leading tone. The other thing is we have a bunch of different types of tone movements. Okay, so you have returning tones, you have diatonic passing tones, you have changing tones, you have leading tones. Oh gosh, there's a bunch of different kinds of things. I'm not sure I can remember every single one of them right now, but it doesn't matter. You have these tonal movements, and if you chromatic alterations, right? So you have chromatic alterations. They all have a different sort of nature to them. Tonal movement has nature. If I have a chromatic alteration in something, that means if I'm going from G to an F and I'm moving chromatically, so that's a chromatic alteration. If I'm going to this tone and I want to do it in an anticipation, I could just do this. Right? I can also do it as a changing tone, meaning the tone moves. So I went. So it's a changing tone means it goes someplace and comes back in the opposite direction. So I'm going up and I come down, right? So it changed direction. That's why it's called a changing tone. If I want to do a returning tone, it moves in a direction and then comes back to the same tone. So let's say I was going to a C chord from a G here to the C. It's a returning tone, right? So we're combining tonal movements, okay? So the idea is to practice voice leading of two notes, starting with the B flat minor chord. So I only have two notes in the chord, and that's the -3 and the 5, and they're going to switch back and forth. In other words, the -3 of the B flat is going to go to the 5 of the F if it's a root cycle 5, right? So watch. That's the movement. Hear it? Okay, the other tone, the 5, can have a DPT, a diatonic passing tone. Okay? So those are the basic tonal movements. And you want to practice them. So my root cycle, let's say I'm going from a B flat to an A flat, right? To an A flat, and I want the A flat with a minor 5. So it wouldn't be this. You know, I'd rather go here. So if I do this. That's a pretty sound. You start to compose music very simply because you're just working out linear, horizontal movements, and you're using your guitar for that. We want guitar players to be composers because you can make a great living being a composer. Make a great living. And the nice thing about it is the music business is a fun business, which it eludes most musicians. But it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of fun happening in the music business. Okay, so that's a diatonic passing tone. And what we need to do now is to look at, let's see here. I'm going to see what we've got. We've got all these different scales, and so every scale has a different diatonic passing tone. For example, if instead of a B flat moving, let's say this was just a B flat minor scale. But let's say the seventh on this scale, let's say B flat minor major seventh, or the B flat, what you could call is the flat six scale, it's got, so it'd be. Well, the diatonic passing tone would change then. So it'd be this. It's a little more mysterious sounding. I think it's prettier, right? So if your scale is scale with a flatted sixth in it, like a Dorian mode has a flat six in it, or the Aeolian has a minus six in it, right? So if you have a minus six, you're going to have that interesting sound. And so now when you're composing, you could say, I want a little different emotional flavor. And then you choose a scale that gives you that in its diatonic passing tones. All right. And it takes a while to get used to that. So let's say we call it scale 11. It's a minor major seventh scale, right? And so it sounds like this. I'm going to do it in A. And it's very pretty, but it gives you this sound, so it's right. So what if I'm going from? Let's go back up, or let's do our little voice leading. So I'm going to do an A minor with a minus 3 and the 5, and we're going to go to an E minor with the 5 and the minus 3. So this is going to be. So what if my A minor is an A minor major 7th scale? What kind of a movement would that be? So watch here. I'm going to move from 5. Watch. That'd be a changing tone, because it went off in one direction and came back the other one and didn't land on the same note. If it landed on the same note, it would be a returning tone. Okay, if it landed on the same note. So if I started off here, right? Now I'm landing on the same note. I went. But if I go, now it's a changing tone, because we're going to different direction and a different tone. Okay, so these are just the categories. All this stuff is really laid out in very, very great explanations by Frank Herlinger in the Music Interval Theory Academy main course in composition, because that's not just designed for guitars. What we're doing here is we're taking stuff from the main course and showing guitar players how to apply this stuff and how to think about it. Because if you have a method of thinking, you can be more efficient. Otherwise, you sit and you're hunting for a good idea. Like I could say, for example, let's say we're going to sit down and write a song. I know that if I use substitute tones, which we're not studying today, so this is a bonus, okay? This is a big bonus lesson. Substitute tone. So I've got a C chord, and I want to go to an F chord. Well, that's all well and good, but if I use a substitute tone for the fifth, let's say I use the 4 for the fifth. Now I get this. What if I use a substitute tone when I go to the F chord? Here's the fifth. If I use the 4 for that. Now I get this. So that's just a C chord to an F chord for me. Okay, that's I just look at it as C to F. I don't look at it as a sus or anything else. I'm using a substitute tone, right? If I want to explain it to a keyboard player or something, depends on how smart they are. If they're really smart, they just know automatically. But if they're not so smart, I would tell them, well, I'm just using a 4 and a major third. I'm using the third and the fourth in there. But that's an awkward structure to voice lead if you don't understand how to do it. Because if I wanted a voice lead that, I would go here. Now I'm going to the B flat, because this was C, F, B flat, right? But this is what I get now. See how pretty that is? And you can resolve all these. So you can go. Very pretty. And that takes me into a musical zone just by thinking of, I'm going to use substitute tone in my little 3-part chords. Okay, that's enough of that because we have a long way to go. I want to try to get all this material handled. So let's just keep moving here. So we have numbers for our scales. So a scale for us, which would be the Dorian mode, we call it scale number 3. Okay, and the Dorian mode is this sound. Trevor Morris used that in Vikings. So if you think in terms of the scale, your passing tones, your returning tones, your changing tones, your leading tones, your chromatic alterations, all change. They change. And you have to know how they're going to change. Now, there's a bunch of ways to think. Modally, if you're in a mode, you could just stay in that mode over one root tone. And then you're using the diatonic passing tones and all those movements in what we call PC, position change. So if I'm in A minor, I want to get to the next A minor, I can use a diatonic passing tone. Excuse me. You can edit that out, Jeff. So if I want to get to the next A minor, I can use the diatonic passing tone, but I have a bunch of different possibilities because there's a long way to the next one, because from here, this is the top note. It's here. So this is... I have all that way to fill in. Or... So you can hear the difference that I'm changing the scale, right? And so if you understand what the scales are, you can create an emotional feeling. Certain scales have very powerful emotional attachments to the arrangement of the notes. Okay, so it's very good for you to know that you can have change of position in the same chord, like A chord. It's all the same position, or I'm sorry, the same chord, right? Or you can have position changing, right? PC changing because the root's changing. So if I'm descending from A, going A to G to F, it could be, okay, to E flat, then so, right? That's changing positions, but changing tonal centers at the same time. So it might be a little bit complicated, but it's not really. If you practice the root cycles, and there's lots of root cycle education on the Music Interval Theory website. It's the Music Interval Theory .academy. Okay, Music Interval Theory .academy. Check it out. There's all kinds of stuff, and you can become a member if you want. But I'm not saying you have to. We're going to get the guitar stuff out there anyway. But there's a ton of great composers and musicians and other guitar players and that sort of thing. And you have a lot of camaraderie. And especially if you're trying to figure something out, you can get a lot of help. So Music Interval Theory Academy is a great place to go. All right. So moving on with this lesson 2.1. There is a bunch of scales. The church modes are what we're going to stick to, okay? The church modes there's 7 of them, and so I want you to practice the different church modes, and then I want you to write a plain song in every church mode. So if I'm telling you, okay, Dorian mode, plain song, we're going to use the Dorian mode. Here you go. It's Dorian mode. I'm just going to write a melody. Don't worry about chords, just the melody. So let's just play. Let's see. Okay, so your assignment is to write a plain song in each of the modes. Every mode, you write a plain song. And you just keep a nice melody going. And you can hold the root if you can and play your song, but you don't have to. Okay? And just keep it over the same root, because the next steps are going to be plain songs but with changing roots. And keeping that in your mind. But the first thing you want to do is understand the plain songs. So the first scale is going to be the Lydian, because it's the brightest. And here's the Lydian scale. So so you write a plain song, and you try to keep it in a form, like a song form. Okay? So you'd have an A, B, A section, or an A, B, C, A section. It can be what you want. Keep it simple. But they should have a contour to them. So if I'm going to do the first section, should be... Okay, that's got a form to it. All right. So now the Alydian is that. The Ionian is this. That's going to be a different type of a song. Right? That sounds different than the Lydian because of that one note that's just a little bit different. Okay? After the Ionian, you're going to do the Dorian mode. Okay? And the Dorian mode is... come up with some pretty stuff. Just get used to hearing the modes, right? And so you have the Dorian mode. The next is going to be the Phrygian mode. Phrygian mode is, that's such a good mode because in A, we're doing it all in A. And what is that? That's a Phrygian mode, okay? After the Phrygian mode, you're going to go to the Mixolydian mode, which has this sound. It's a dominant. That's where you'd get blues and stuff like that. Okay? Now the Aeolian mode. And this has a -3 and a -6 and a -7 and back to the 1. And then the Locrian mode. Locrian mode is the darkest. So we started off the lightest and you go into the darkest. Here's the notes. Okay, the Locrian mode, that would be if you're writing some sort of a fun dance festival music for, Asia Minor type cultures, that sort of thing. I only know of one Locrian piece that was written by Rachmaninoff because it doesn't have a perfect fifth in it in the scale. So it's a flatted 5 in the scale. You could call it that. There's more. I'm telling you in diatonic speak. For me, it's just got a 6 in it. Like from here, that's a 6, right? But that interval wants to go here. Or here. You can hear. So the Locrian always wants to take you someplace, It's like, Okay, I'll come. Anyway, but it's a great sound, and you get a lot of fun. Okay, so your assignment is to spend time with the church modes. Okay, the church modes, we'll have a list of the church modes, and you can see what they look like, and just get familiar and write some what we call plain songs on using a church mode, and get your ears used to hearing those different modes. And that's going to connect you to different emotions. Okay, I'm TC. That's enough for today. This is 2.1 of Music Interval Theory Academy's guitar series. And I really appreciate it. I hope you hang in there and that you learn something. Because if you just learn a little bit of something, it's good. Pretty soon all the little tidbits end up being a lot. Okay? Thanks. Talk to you soon.